Hello, Brianna, Vanessa, Jill, Jessica, Lisa, Karina, Sherry, Misty, Paulina, Sarah, Cami, Jennifer, Amy, Stacy, Mary, Nikita, and Yvette. It's the last week 6 already of our class together in ethical leadership. Thanks for all of your hard work. Thanks for all of your great contributions. And if there's any way that I could be helpful as we finish up the course, please let me know. This last week had a lot of great discussion, a lot of great contributions, a lot of great points were raised. There's just a couple of things that I want to lift up. In the first discussion, the ethical dilemma, I'd like to point back to some of the other ethical dilemma discussions that we've had and point something out that often happens when we're faced with an ethical dilemma, when we're faced even not with an ethical dilemma, but when we're faced with someone who appears to be acting badly and sometimes very badly. Our friend Kevin, who's the office manager at the real estate company. In that discussion, as Kevin was allowing people from the community to come in and use the office equipment, make copies, and use the telephone, and he had been asked to kind of limit that because the company is not doing well financially, but he continued to let people do that. Kevin was seen by many of us as insubordinate, as not loyal to the company, as irresponsible, as not respecting the confidentiality of the information that was in the office, like confidential loan and financial information, because people should not be allowed to just come in, suppose something's left on the copier, and Kevin wasn't even thinking of that. So Kevin was not a good person. He was insubordinate. He was not loyal. He was unreliable. The situation with Sue and John. Sue works at the same technology company that you do, and she's dating John. John wants to start his own technology company, and Sue comes to you and says, well, I was going to share some information with John. He wanted to know some things about how businesses run, and I have access to things that are not common knowledge, that are confidential, that might be helpful. Do you think there's any issue with sharing those things with John? And some of the things that we thought about John were that he's not a good guy, he's manipulating Sue, maybe he's using the relationship just to get access to this information, or even once he gets the information, he'll dump Sue, and Sue will be without her new beau and perhaps without a job because she did something unethical or even possibly illegal. And it was the question was asked to, well, what's wrong with Sue? Why is she even thinking about this? Is she not loyal to her company? Does she have some self-esteem issues that she wants to make the relationship better by sharing this information? What's wrong with Sue? And neither Sue nor John look like very good people. And in the last case, the case for this week, Karen Johnson and the becoming the CEO of the company, and you are the supervisor of the customer service representatives, and Karen comes to you and says, I want you to keep a log on Sylvia and on Dean, and I want to be able to fire them in 30 days because I've never liked them being around here. And Sylvia is the only African American, and Dean is the only openly gay male in the company. And it certainly looks like Karen is prejudiced, that she is a prejudiced, racist, homophobic person, not a good person. That certainly looks that way. And a lot of us were willing to make that leap. The theme that connects these situations is the fundamental attribution error. Some of you have probably heard of this. The fundamental attribution error is a psychological term, and it describes the tendency that we have to overestimate the effect of disposition or personality on other people and underestimate the effect of the situation when we're explaining the way that other people behave. Another simpler way to say that is when we see somebody else doing something wrong, we tend to think it's because that person is a bad person. On the other hand, when we do something wrong, we're tempted to explain it in terms of the situation that perhaps made us act in a way that was not the best way. So, for example, if you see someone speeding down the highway and driving in a way that doesn't look very safe because it's so fast, we tend to say, that idiot, he doesn't care about safety, he's not respectful of other people's lives. How could somebody act so irresponsibly? Whereas if we're driving fast down the highway, we might explain it as, my kid is in the car, he fell, he cut his head on a fence, and I'm rushing him to the emergency room. Or perhaps even less drastically, I am on my way to an extremely important interview and I'm going to be late if I don't speed, and I really need this job because my family really needs my support. I can't afford to be late, and that's why I'm speeding. So we tend to assume that when other people do bad things, it's because they're bad people, whereas if we do something that's perhaps not the most outstanding thing, there is a really, really good reason for it, or a good explanation for it. So how does that fit in with our three cases? Well, with Kevin, suppose it's not that Kevin is insubordinate or disloyal or that he doesn't care about the possibility that confidentiality might be violated, but he's thinking it really doesn't cost that much to make copies. Hardly anybody uses the phone anyway, and if somebody comes in once in a while and needs to use the phone, we pay the same cost for local calls. We pay a flat fee for local calls, so it really doesn't matter. And the goodwill that's generated by these simple, small acts of kindness is worth a lot more than the marginal financial costs. It really gives us a good reputation in the community and helps people to recommend us, and we get business because of this. So in Kevin's mind, this is a good thing to do. And he is careful not to leave any confidential information around. Is that possible? Is that a possible explanation than the explanation that we gave earlier, that he was insubordinate and careless and disloyal? Maybe. Maybe it is. We don't know. We would have to kind of explore that, have more conversation. And with Sue and John, suppose that John is starting a technology company that's actually quite different than the company that Sue works at. John's company makes a completely different product. It's still technology. There's still some overlaps. There are still some things that Sue might be able to give insight about just in the way that the technology industry works, but there's no direct competition. There's no customers that would be, that John would be striving to steal from Sue's company. And John never asked for any confidential information. He just thought that Sue knows a lot of stuff, and even though a lot of it's accessible online and stuff is accessible in the public arena, she has some knowledge and expertise and might be able to help him. Is that possible? Is it possible? We don't know. We don't know. Again, I realize this is painting the best face possible on it, and most of the time things are not that great. But it's also true that things are not the worst case scenario either. Even in a case like Karen Johnson. Now, this is the case where Karen clearly wants to do something unethical. The question is Karen deeply prejudiced against African American people and gay people? Or could there be another explanation for the reason that she wants to get rid of Dean and Sylvia? Now, in this case, even if there's another reason that she wants to get rid of Dean and Sylvia, since she has admitted that performance is not a problem, that's going to be unethical, and it's going to be a big problem because they're part of a union. So what she wants to do is clearly wrong and problematic. But is it as bad as it looks on the surface? Is it an instance where she's acting out of prejudice against African Americans and prejudice against gay people, or could there be another explanation? And I said in the discussion forum, well, we don't know. Could it be possible, for example, that Sylvia and Dean got hired at the same time? They're good friends. They joke around a lot. They laugh a lot. Doesn't affect their performance. They both make their numbers. They both deal really well with customers. But Karen's a very serious person, and she doesn't like that atmosphere of joviality in the office. She thinks it's unprofessional, and so she wants to get rid of them. Now, again, that might seem a little bit far-fetched, but is it possible? That's what I'm saying. Is it possible that it's not as terrible as it looks on the surface? That it's not, well, Karen's just an evil person, but Karen might be somebody who still wants to do something that's wrong and may not have the best reasons for doing it, but that she's not out and out racist and homophobic. It could be. It could be. And exploring that might be worthwhile, especially if Karen's been there for as long as she has. You might have a relationship with her. You know, you have some. You would have some background too. You would have some background to try to figure out, wow, this just isn't like Karen. Maybe I need to explore a little bit more rather than just assuming that all these years she's been hiding these terrible prejudices. The other forum on the power of change and social change, again, a lot of great insights there. How do we work to improve the world, to protect the environment, to work for equality, to work to eliminate poverty, to work to increase justice in the world? And a lot of you had some very good insights. Some of you talked about laws, about things like carbon tax to protect the environment, laws against pollution, pay to pollute policies, things like that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. The environment is a shared good, and there aren't any usually direct financial incentives for companies to preserve the environment over the short term, because they're looking for the short term. They're not looking for, is this going to affect the environment 50, 100 years from now? Although others of you pointed out that we can, as consumers, impose a financial cost on companies that are not environmentally friendly or that use child labor or act in other ways that are unethical, that we as consumers could say we have higher expectations and we won't buy your product if you act in these ways, and that we do have some power in that way. And I think it's true that we do have some power. Remember Margaret Mead, the cultural anthropologist, who said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world." And that's the way most social change starts. It starts with a small group of very committed people. If you think of the women's suffrage movement in the United States, Susan B. Anthony and people like that who came together and started working for change. And it took a long time. It started with a small group, but it happened. It happened. Or if you think of the abolitionist movement in the United States, where it started again with small people, a lot of people who were kind of on the margins, people like John Woolman. But eventually they worked, they were committed, they convinced more and more people of the evil of slavery, and eventually it was overcome. So it is possible for change to happen, and it is possible for us to have an influence on that change. And perhaps more importantly, in our own little small parts of the world, when we are acting as ethical leaders, when we are acting in a way that invites and encourages others to act ethically, to do the right thing, to protect the environment, to treat others equitably, to act in ways that preserve others' rights. When we encourage people to do that and act in the ways ourselves that make that more possible for others to join us, that's ethical leadership. And do we have to challenge people sometimes? Of course. Are there times where we may even have to, as leaders, engage in actions that are punitive? Unfortunately, I think that's true too. But I think our primary goal and role as ethical leaders is showing others the way to lead a more ethical life and to move more toward equality, justice, fairness, respect for one another. So thank you again for all of your excellent contributions. And as I said, if there's any way that I can be helpful, please let me know. Thanks.